I'm Kala. On my parents' anniversary, I gave them a gift. Something meaningful, something that cost me years of hard work. They laughed, called it useless, until they saw the apartment deed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been cutting me out long before that dinner, bit by bit, erasing my name from family photos, stealing my future, even forging documents to take what was left of my father's legacy. So how did it get that far? How does a daughter become a stranger in her own home? Let me tell you what really happened. Because it didn't start at that dinner. It started the day my dad never came home. The invitation came through a short, impersonal text. No greeting, no warmth. Just, 15th anniversary dinner, La Mirabelle, 8 p.m. sharp, be decent. I stared at the screen for a full minute, reading it over again as if some part of me expected a second message to follow. Maybe a softer tone, hope you'll come, or even, dare I dream, we'd love to see you. But there was nothing else. That was Dolores' style. Straight to the point, dressed up in silk and sequins, but emotionally threadbare. I didn't reply, just marked the date on my calendar and closed my phone. Not because I wanted to go, but because I needed to see it. The final performance, the last show. Some part of me craved the closure that had been withheld for years. La Mirabelle was the kind of restaurant that screamed elegance to people who'd never actually experienced it. Faux crystal chandeliers, oversized wine glasses, and menus written entirely in French, with prices that were more about status than substance. I walked in wearing a classic navy dress, nothing flashy, just clean lines and quiet grace. I didn't need sparkle. I was there to watch them shine and burn out. They were already seated in a private dining room at the back, laughing too loudly, sipping wine like it was celebration and not spectacle. Dolores sat at the head of the table, glittering in silver sequins that caught the light and demanded attention. Gideon beside her, red-cheeked from too much Cabernet. Lyra and Bran flanked them, looking smug and overpolished. Delora looked up, gave me a quick once-over, then smiled with razor-thin lips. "Oh, you actually came." She leaned toward Lyra and added just loud enough, "I figured she'd send one of those Hallmark cards again." I pulled out the small box from my bag, a gift wrapped in minimalist paper with a dark velvet ribbon. Subtle, understated, just like the life I had built. I handed it to her with both hands, steady. "Happy anniversary." She took it like it might bite. "It's tiny," she muttered, already laughing. "Well, let's see what our little prodigal daughter thinks is worthy of our 15th. She tore the ribbon with the kind of dramatic flair she'd saved for a stage play, flipped the lid off, and stared inside. Silence, for a moment. Then, laughter. Her head tilted back. "A deed?" she scoffed. "To what?" "A storage unit?" Gideon chuckled. "Probably to a one-bedroom over a liquor store." Lyra leaned in. "Is this a joke?" Bran didn't say a word, but the smirk on his face did enough damage. I stayed calm. "It's a luxury apartment in Cherry Creek, fully paid off. It was meant for you, but I've changed the name on the deed." You could feel it, the shift, a ripple under the skin of the room. Their faces froze, not in awe, not in gratitude, but in discomfort, in disbelief that I could possibly be someone now, without them. Dolores' eyes narrowed. "Why would you give that to me?" "I thought you might appreciate it," I said, "until I remembered who you are." She slammed the box shut. "Don't pull this holier-than-thou crap, Kala." "You think success erases how you left us?" Gideon added. "You've got a big mouth for someone who disappeared when things got tough." I didn't flinch. "I left when you made it clear I didn't belong." I stood up slowly, pushed my chair back without a sound. "Enjoy the dinner." I didn't wait for them to stop me. No one did. I walked out, the velvet box still on the table, the ribbon dangling like a loose thread from a life I no longer wanted to stitch myself into. That night, my phone lit up nonstop. Delora. I may have overreacted. We should talk. Lyra. Hey, about that internship thing you mentioned. I've been thinking maybe we could start over. Bran. Look, family fights. But it's stupid to let this get in the way of helping each other. I blocked them all. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't that girl at the table anymore. I was done performing. This wasn't the beginning. This was the ending I needed to begin again. I didn't always know how to walk away. But it started the day my father never came home. I was 13. It was a Tuesday, I think. The kind of day no one would remember unless something terrible happened. And something did. That morning, my dad kissed me on the forehead like he always did, the scent of his aftershave lingering as he walked out the door. Be good, sweetheart, he said with a wink, keys jingling in his hand. I smiled, still clutching my cereal spoon. Delora sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up, didn't say goodbye. He hesitated for a second, then left without a word from her. I remember thinking it was strange. Just a flicker of unease, quickly brushed away. By lunch, he was gone. They pulled me out of math class. The principal's face looked like she'd been practicing her expression in the mirror. Your mother is here, she said softly. Her voice was syrupy, too sweet. Delora sat in the office chair, legs crossed, makeup immaculate. Not a single smudge under her eyes. Her tone was flat. Your father passed away at work. Heart attack. That was it. No hug, no tears. Just a hand on my shoulder, barely a pat. My whole world cracked in that moment, and she didn't even flinch. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls in our house were paper thin. Delora didn't care. She never lowered her voice when it mattered. I was on the stairs when I heard her talking to someone on the phone. Laura, I think. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I didn't have to. Honestly, this might be for the best, she said, her voice hushed but sharp. Being a widow sounds a hell of a lot better than being divorced. My breath caught. No lawyers, no splitting assets. I keep everything. Then she laughed. Laughed. Of course I'll cry at the funeral. I've already picked the dress. My stomach twisted. I covered my mouth with both hands, afraid a sound might escape. In that moment, something inside me shifted. A thread snapped, not loudly, but with quiet finality. The funeral was exactly what she promised. Delora wore a black dress that hugged her like she was on the runway, not in mourning. People kept coming up to her, saying how strong she was, how brave. She's keeping it together so well, one woman whispered. She's always been the practical one, said another. No one noticed that she didn't cry. Not once. Not even when they lowered the casket. But Ruth did. Aunt Ruth stood near the back, lips pressed tight, arms crossed. She watched Delora with narrowed eyes and didn't say a word to her the entire day. 4 months later, Gideon appeared. He came over for dinner, dressed in some stiff blazer like he was there for a job interview, not to meet the daughter of his new conquest. Delora greeted him with a laugh I hadn't heard since before Dad died. Lyra and Bran were with him, smiling like they'd just won a prize. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. Real food, actual effort. She hadn't cooked like that in years, not even when Dad was alive. That night, the table was full, the lights were warm, and I felt like a guest in my own home. Calla, Delora said, her voice sugary sweet, we have an announcement. I already knew. I could see it in the way she touched Gideon's arm, how her eyes gleamed with some twisted kind of victory. We're getting married! Everyone clapped. I forced a smile so tight it hurt. That's great! Congratulations, Gideon looked at me like he was sizing up a stranger. Lyra beamed across the table and said, We'll be like sisters. I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked at my potatoes and said nothing. From that night on, things moved quickly. Too quickly. She stopped mentioning Dad's name altogether. Gideon's photo joined the mantel where my father's used to sit. I remember asking once, quietly, cautiously, What did you do with Dad's picture? Delora didn't even look up. We're starting a new chapter, Calla. Don't be so dramatic. She replaced the past like changing out furniture. Lyra got my old stereo. Bran took over the garage for his video games. Gideon's truck filled the driveway. Their lives took up space until there was none left for mine. And still, no one saw it but me. They thought she was rebuilding. I knew she was erasing. It started with a wall. One afternoon, I came home from school and stopped short in the hallway. The picture frames that used to hold photos of me and my dad. Our trip to the lake, the science fair he cheered me through, that blurry one where I had chocolate all over my face and he was laughing, were gone. In their place were new frames. Larger, shinier. A staged family portrait of Delora, Gideon, Lyra, and Bran, all dressed in matching colors. One of Bran at his football game. Another of Lyra holding a trophy I didn't know she'd won. I stood there for minutes. Frozen. Like if I waited long enough, the old pictures would reappear. They didn't. That night at dinner, I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. Where are the photos of Dad and me? Delora didn't miss a bite of her salad. I'm updating the house, she said. It's time we moved forward. You should too. Gideon nodded, as if it made perfect sense. No use living in the past, he added, reaching for his wine. But those weren't just pictures, I whispered. They were him. Delora sighed, setting down her fork. Calla, don't be so sentimental. Everyone loses people. It doesn't mean you stop living. From that day forward, I stopped asking questions. A few weeks later, my playroom, my sanctuary filled with books, old board games, and half-finished puzzles, was emptied. Lyra stood in the middle of it, with paint samples and brushes, grinning. This is going to be my studio, she said. Mom says it's time I have my own space. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding. That was my room, Lyra shrugged. You don't even use it anymore. And besides, Mom said you need to learn to share. Bran got the sunroom, the one Dad promised we'd turn into a reading nook. He turned it into a gaming cave, the door always locked, snacks spilling onto the carpet. When I tried to talk to Delora about it, she barely looked up. Don't be selfish, Calla. They're adjusting, and we need to make them feel welcome. I started eating dinner in my room. One morning, the family calendar had something scribbled in pink glitter pen. Lyra's party. I stared at the date. It was mine, my birthday. I waited all day for someone to say something, anything. A happy birthday, a card, even a pat on the back. When I got home from school, the house was filled with balloons. Streamers dangled from the ceiling. A cake sat on the counter that read, "To our shining star, Lyra." Delora turned to me, mid-toast, smiling like a politician. Oh, Calla, honey, I completely forgot. Yours is today too, right? Or is it tomorrow? People laughed, assuming it was all in good fun. I slipped away before the candles were lit. That night, I found a cupcake in the fridge, left over from some store-bought pack. I lit a match from the junk drawer, stuck it in the frosting, and sang "Happy Birthday" under my breath. That was the night I started writing. I found a plain spiral notebook and tucked it under my mattress. I wrote to Dad like he could still hear me. Told him about the empty frames, the quiet dinners, the way it felt to be erased while still living under the same roof. They took your face off the walls, I wrote, but I still see you. I still hear your laugh in the mornings, even when the house is silent. Over time, the entries became less about them and more about me. What I felt, what I feared, what I hoped no one would ever know I hoped. I stopped speaking unless I had to. I didn't slam doors or cry where they could hear. I just floated, like a shadow in the corners of a house that used to be mine. If they won't see me, I wrote once, I'll make sure the world does. And from then on, I did my best to fade from their lives, while quietly building the one they never expected I could. I thought keeping quiet would keep me safe, but silence didn't shield me. It only made it easier for them to twist the story. The first time it really hit me was during Lyra's senior art fundraiser. Delora had given her an envelope with several $100s to submit for her materials and competition fees. The envelope vanished the same day. By that evening, I was standing in the kitchen, backpack still on one shoulder, when Delora stormed in like a hurricane. "Where is it?" she demanded. "Where's what?" "Don't play innocent, Calla," she snapped, pointing a finger like a prosecutor in court. "The envelope, the one with Lyra's tuition money." My heart dropped. "I didn't take anything." "Of course you didn't," Lyra said, arms folded, eyes gleaming. "Just like you didn't throw out my brushes last month." "That wasn't me!" Delora crossed her arms. "Just admit it. You've always resented her. I'm not blind, Calla." I looked at Gideon, who barely glanced up from the TV. Bran stayed upstairs. No one cared. No one even asked if there was any proof. The next morning, Delora still hadn't calmed down. "You know what hurts more than the money?" she said, stirring her coffee like it personally offended her. "Knowing I can't even trust my own daughter." The envelope turned up 3 days later, in Lyra's art bin, folded under some sketches. No apology, no correction. Delora just waved a hand. "She's under a lot of pressure. You're strong, Calla. She's fragile." That sentence landed like a stone. Not because it was cruel, but because it was deliberate. They wanted me to swallow it and move on. So I did. But a piece of me lodged it somewhere deep, where the things that never got resolved went to rot. At school, things didn't get better. They got darker. It started with whispers. A few snickers in the hallway. I noticed people looking at me, then looking away too quickly. Then someone in English class said, "Didn't think you were that kind of girl, Calla." I didn't know what they meant until I saw it. An Instagram profile with my full name, my face, and posts I'd never made. Bitter captions. Photos that were edited to look suggestive, like I was desperate for attention. A message thread with someone I didn't even know, full of flirty replies I never sent. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I knew who it was before I even asked. Lyra had that kind of creativity. Twisted, personal, effective. I found her in the school parking lot. "Why?" I asked. She tilted her head, smiling. "Maybe you should ask yourself why people believe it's you." I showed Delora the account. Her response? A shrug. "It's just teenage drama. Everyone goes through this. Grow up." "Someone is impersonating me." "Oh, please. You're acting like it's identity theft." "Because it is." She rolled her eyes. "If you spent half as much time fixing your attitude as you do blaming your sister, maybe things would be different." That's when I stopped trying to explain. My voice didn't carry weight in that house, or anywhere else they touched. At night, I wrote more. I filled pages. Not just letters to Dad anymore, but journal entries. Rage laid out in neat cursive. "I didn't deserve this," I wrote. "But I'll let it mold me. Fire doesn't just destroy, it forges." I no longer expected fairness. I didn't crave approval. I started letting go of the idea that anything I did would change them. So I stopped defending myself. And I started planning a life where I wouldn't need to. It arrived in a thin, white envelope, the kind most people wouldn't even glance at twice. But I knew what it was the moment I saw the university logo in the top corner. My hands trembled as I peeled it open, heart thudding like it hadn't dared to in years. "Dear Calla Morgan, we are pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship." I had to read it twice just to believe it. I sat down on my bed, letter in hand, eyes wide, jaw slack. For the first time in what felt like forever, something was mine, earned, not given. A door cracked open, leading somewhere that didn't have their voices in the next room. I didn't tell anyone that night. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a book on my shelf, and waited for the right moment. I knew they wouldn't be happy for me, but I hoped, some small, stubborn part of me still hoped, they might at least pretend. A few nights later, during dinner, I brought it up. Everyone was in their usual places, chewing, scrolling, ignoring. "I got into West Virginia University," I said, voice steady, "with a full ride." Delora didn't even blink. For what? Business management? Silence. Who's paying for your dorm? She said finally, wiping her mouth. Because we're already budgeting for Lyra's design program. I told you, it's a full scholarship. Housing, tuition, books. She laughed. Those scholarships always come with strings. And you? You're not ready for that kind of pressure. It's not your decision. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Before I could answer, she reached across the table, snatched the letter from my hand. She didn't even read it. She tore it down the center, slow and deliberate, like she was slicing me out of her future. I'm doing you a favor, she said, tossing the halves onto my plate. Dreams are dangerous when they don't fit your reality. Bran gave a quiet chuckle. Lyra barely looked up. I stared at the pieces of my future, now limp under a smear of mashed potatoes, and something inside me snapped. But it didn't shatter. It crystallized. I stood up. I won't forget this. Delora smiled, smug. Good. Then maybe you'll stop wasting everyone's time. That weekend, I packed a bag and took the bus to Ruth's cottage. She opened the door before I even knocked. I was wondering when you'd come. We didn't speak much at first. She poured tea. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to hold it all together. I told her what happened, how Delora tore the letter like it meant nothing. Ruth didn't gasp or rage. She nodded, got up, and disappeared into the back room. She returned with an old manila envelope, yellowed at the corners, thick with something heavy inside. Your father gave me this 3 weeks before he passed, she said, placing it in front of me. He told me to keep it safe, just in case. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a bank statement and a letter in my dad's handwriting. The account had my name on it. The savings were more than enough. He worried about Delora, Ruth said quietly. Said she'd been acting different, cold, secretive. He didn't want your future tied to anyone but yourself. Tears filled my eyes, but they didn't fall. I held the letter like it was life itself. They tried to chain me to that house, I whispered, but my father built a key and left it with someone who actually loved me. That night, I stayed in the guest room. The next day, I used Ruth's address to start applying again, this time in secret. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about finally living. They waited until I was barely a month from graduation, as if they needed to remind me one more time that this was their house, their rules, and I had only ever been passing through. Gideon called it a family meeting, but I knew better the moment I stepped into the living room. He was standing beside the coffee table with a folder in his hand. Delora sat stiffly on the love seat, arms crossed. Lyra was scrolling through her phone, but smirking like she already knew the punchline. Sit, Gideon said, voice clipped. I didn't move. He opened the folder. This is a basic asset reassignment form. Legal, straightforward, just a formality. I looked at the header, my name, printed in bold letters, and then the phrase, relinquishment of inheritance claims. What is this? I asked. Delora kept her eyes fixed on the wall. Gideon answered without pause. We're just protecting the house. There's been some legal restructuring. You're 18 now. This is about being responsible. I'm not signing that. His tone sharpened. This isn't optional. You're either with this family or you're out. Lyra chuckled under her breath. She's just mad she won't get a piece. I stared at Delora. She said nothing, not a word. I should have walked away. I should have called Ruth, or a lawyer, or screamed. But I didn't. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. It wasn't consent, it was exhaustion. I signed. The next week, Delora mailed out the family Christmas cards. She didn't show me the final design. I saw it when one of my teachers brought it to school. Look who's all grown up, she'd said cheerfully, handing me the glossy postcard. It read, Happy Holidays from the Vance family, Gideon, Delora, Lyra, and Bran. No mention of me, not even in the fine print. I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled politely and slid it into my bag. At home, I found a whole stack of them in the trash. The extras. They'd ordered 100. When I asked Delora about it, she didn't flinch. "You've made it pretty clear you're not really part of this family anymore." One of my aunts left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, did you move? We got the card, but your name's not on it." Delora's response? "Calla's doing her own thing. She's barely here." She said it like I was a guest who overstayed their welcome. That night, I stood in my room, staring at the walls that used to have photos, the drawers that no longer had meaning. I pulled out the old suitcase from under my bed and began packing in silence. One sweatshirt, a few books, the planner I never let anyone see, a folder of scholarship applications sent from Ruth's address. They thought they could push me out. I was just making it official. I whispered aloud, "They erased me from their pictures, but I'll frame my own life." No one heard me. But that didn't matter. The last thing I packed wasn't for school. It was a bracelet I wore as a kid. Silver, worn down, with my initials barely legible on the clasp. I placed it in the top drawer of Dad's old desk. Not as a gift, not as a goodbye, but as a mark that I had existed there. I closed the drawer slowly. "I'm not the one who left," I said quietly. "You pushed me out." The lawyer slid the folder across the table, his expression unreadable but respectful. "All right, Ms. Morgan, everything's in order. Once you sign here, the property is officially transferred." I didn't hesitate. With one stroke of a pen, I gave Aunt Ruth the apartment in Cherry Creek. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, granite countertops, and more peace than I'd ever known under Delora's roof. "She stood by me when no one else did," I said softly. "She deserves a home." He nodded, gathering the documents. "You understand this is permanent?" "Yes," I replied. "That's the point." When I stepped outside, the Denver air was crisp and dry, the kind of cold that woke you up without biting too deep. I took a breath so full, it felt like my lungs were claiming space for the first time in years. Back at Ruth's, she was already pouring tea. Chamomile, her version of a toast. "You sure about this?" she asked, though her eyes already knew the answer. "She's going to come knocking," she added, setting my cup down. "She always does when she starts slipping." I wrapped my hands around the mug. "Let her." And like clockwork, she came. 2 days later, a loud, frantic pounding shook the front door. Not a knock, a demand. Ruth glanced out the window, then at me. "It's her!" I didn't move. Ruth walked to the door, opened it halfway. Delora was already mid-sentence. "I need to speak to my daughter. This has gone too far." Ruth kept her tone even. "Calla is an adult. You don't just get to appear now and expect access." Delora didn't even blink. "I want the account, the money from Franklin. It belongs to this family." "No," Ruth said. "It belongs to Calla. Your husband left it for her, and you knew that." "She wouldn't even have a future without me," Delora snapped. "I carried her for 9 months. I fed her. I gave her a roof." Ruth's voice didn't rise, but her words cut clean. "And then you used her pain as leverage. That's not parenting. That's possession." Delora pushed past her, stepping into the living room like she still had a right to claim the air. I stood up. "If you cared even a fraction as much about me as you do that money," I said, "maybe we wouldn't be standing here." Delora's face twisted. "You owe me everything." "I owe you nothing," I said. "You gave me life, and then tried to erase it." She scoffed, turning to Ruth. "You turned her against me." "I didn't have to," Ruth said. "You did that all on your own." Delora's voice cracked, but the anger held steady. "You're throwing away your family!" I met her eyes. "You made sure I never had one." A long silence followed, just the sound of the clock ticking above the mantel. Ruth took out her phone. "If you don't leave now, I'll be calling the police." Delora's jaw clenched. She looked at me one last time, as if expecting me to cave. But I didn't flinch. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Ruth locked it. then looked at me with something that felt like warmth and sorrow all at once. "You're safe here," she said quietly. "You always were. Always will be." I nodded, still frozen in place. But I knew she wasn't done, and that the final mask would break soon. The clinking of forks and the hum of fake laughter still rang in my ears as I replayed the moment at La Mirabelle, not with regret, but with clarity. Delora had reached for the box like it was something to toss in her purse and forget. The wrapping was neat, elegant. I'd spent time choosing the ribbon, tying it like I cared. I didn't, not for her, but for the version of me that used to try so hard to matter. When she opened it and saw only a folded piece of paper, her smirk cracked. "What is this? A gift card? Did you seriously bring something this cheap to my anniversary?" I looked straight at her. "It's the deed to a luxury apartment downtown. You were right, it is too much. You don't deserve it." The silence fell fast and heavy. Lyra's jaw tensed. Bran's smirk dropped. Gideon didn't even flinch, just kept cutting his steak like the room hadn't chilled over. Peter raised his glass slightly, like maybe he thought it was a joke. Delora stared at me, eyes wide with a fury she couldn't make pretty. "You think money makes you better than this family?" I smiled. "Number, but it proved I never needed yours." And then I stood up. I thanked the waitress, left the box in the center of the table, and walked out. No one followed me. No one said a word. Outside, the air was sharp, a bite of cold across my skin. But it felt good. Clean. I expected to feel grief, or guilt, or some pit in my stomach that reminded me I was walking away from blood. But I didn't. I felt weightless. Like I'd finally returned everything they'd ever handed me: blame, silence, erasure, all wrapped in a bow and placed right back in their laps. That night, the messages started. First, Delora. "I may have overreacted. You always were dramatic, but we should talk." Then Lyra. "Hey, about that internship thing? You mentioned it at some point, right? I'm thinking it could look good on my resume." Bran followed. "Look, we've had our issues, but family's family. I need a reference. Just write something basic." I read them all while sipping coffee in Ruth's kitchen. She was humming some old tune, watering her succulents like it was just another Tuesday. And it was. For me, anyway. I didn't reply. The next day, the messages came again. Lyra. "You're being petty." Delora. "You wouldn't even have that apartment if not for me." Bran. "You're not better than us, Calla." And finally, Delora. "You owe us. After everything we did for you." I blocked every number. Then I posted one photo to my private Instagram. Just a shot of the sky from my apartment balcony, the sun melting into pink and orange against the skyline. Caption: "Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes it roars." That photo said everything I didn't need to explain. That evening, I told Ruth everything: the dinner, the messages, the silence that came after. She didn't interrupt, just poured tea into our matching mugs and waited until I exhaled. "You didn't just survive them," she said, eyes soft. "You outgrew them." I nodded. "I'm not angry anymore." "Good," she said, lifting her cup, "because this toast isn't to revenge, it's to release." We clinked mugs gently, and as we sipped, I realized I wasn't aching anymore. I wasn't hiding or hoping or trying to fix what was broken before I was even born. I had finally stopped asking to be loved by people who never knew how. And still, part of me wondered, could I ever truly heal from what they didn't give? My mornings are quiet now. I wake to sunlight filtering through soft curtains, water the basil on my kitchen windowsill, and light a candle Ruth gave me from her favorite boutique, the one that smells like rain and honey. No noise, no tension, just the sound of my own breath and the ticking clock I picked out at a flea market last fall. It's a little crooked, a little chipped, but it works. I updated my resume last week and booked a solo weekend trip up to Boulder. A cabin, a trail, no Wi-Fi. I didn't post about it, didn't announce it. It wasn't for anyone else. These days, I keep things close. Not hidden, just sacred. I don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. My life isn't a performance. It's a place I live in fully. Occasionally, emails still come. From Delora. Subject lines like, "Let's talk," or "We're still family," or the last one, "Don't do this to me." They always start the same way, an apology so polished it squeaks. Then come the reminders, the guilt-laced questions. You can't just pretend we don't exist. After all I did, I still deserve to be part of your life. But I don't open them anymore. I don't need to. There's nothing in them I haven't already read between the lines for years. And not reading them, that's my choice now. On Saturday, I drove to Ruth's. Her garden looked like something out of a painting. All soft purples and deep greens and bursts of marigold. She was already pulling weeds when I arrived, sun hat on, a little dirt under her nails. "I brought the lemon bars," I called out. "You know the rules," she said. "No showing up empty-handed or with store-bought cookies." We laughed, the way we always do. We planted mint together, dug our fingers into the soil, and talked about everything and nothing. At one point, Ruth looked up at me, her face calm and kind. "You changed the story," she said. "You didn't just survive them, you rewrote the ending." I didn't expect the tears. They weren't sad. They just came, because she was right, and hearing it from her made it real. Later that night, back at my apartment, I sat down at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. I wrote a letter to Delora, not out of anger, not for revenge, just words that needed out. "I forgive you," I wrote, "but I no longer need you, and that is my freedom." I folded it and placed it in the bottom drawer. I won't send it. It's not for her. It's for me. Mira came by the next morning. She brought iced coffee and a travel guide. We curled up on my balcony, flipping through pages and circling destinations we might visit one day. Italy, Oregon, maybe even Japan. At one point, she asked if I missed them. I didn't lie. "Sometimes," I said, "but not in the way they think." She nodded, like she understood. I looked out at the skyline, soft clouds drifting over the city I'd rebuilt myself in. "Family isn't always who raised you," I said. "Sometimes it's who helped you rise." Mira reached over and squeezed my hand. There's peace in the silence. Not because I've forgotten the past, but because it no longer gets to win. Sometimes the hardest part isn't walking away. It's believing you're allowed to. I spent years thinking love had to hurt, that loyalty meant silence, and that being family meant enduring anything. But that's not true. What I've learned is this. You don't owe anyone a lifetime of pain just because they gave you your name. Healing doesn't always come with loud victories or grand gestures. Sometimes it's found in small things. A quiet apartment, a friend who stays, a garden full of second chances. It's in choosing peace over permission, and most of all, in choosing yourself, without apology. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or unloved by the very people who were supposed to protect you, let me say this clearly. You are not broken, you are becoming, and you get to define what family means to you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who kept taking more than they gave? Or maybe you found your Ruth, someone who showed up when no one else did? Tell me your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this video touched your heart, or let me know where you're watching from. I read every message. And hey, if this video wasn't for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. I'm here to listen. This space is for you, and for all of us learning how to heal together. And if you'd like more stories like this, ones that dive deep, hit home, and maybe even help you breathe a little easier, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Your next story might be the one you didn't know you needed. Until next time, keep choosing peace. You deserve it.